Let me tell you a story. It's a love story, really, between a child and a book. But more than just a book, it's really a world. You see, my mother and I had this tradition where after school every day, she would take me down to a local bookstore, and for about an hour, we would read together. Sometimes she would be reading to me, sometimes I was showing off and reading to her. Sometimes we sat and listened to the employees read to all of us kids arranged in a little semicircle. And I loved it. Fantastic parenting, Mom. You get 2 thumbs up from me on that front. And I still remember very clearly that day where I pulled off this very long book from the shelf. Not in the sense of like the length of the story, but like physically. The pages were very long. Homicidal Psycho Jungle Cat. Wait a minute. This is familiar, because often I would spend the afternoon at my cousin's house with both of us sprawled on the floor reading Calvin and Hobbes in the sunlight. To this day, I can still very vividly smell the books and feel the carpet pushing into my elbows. He would often take like the earlier, more square books while I would take the later, more rectangular ones. Except this book I didn't recognize. And with a title like that, I assumed my mother wouldn't want my precious little eyes anywhere near it. Boy, have I never been more thankful to be wrong. For some reason, she agreed to purchase this book for me. That day is so clearly defined in my memory because it happened right at the beginning of my transition from like these scattered little childhood memories, just random little snippets of life, to my linear timeline that my memory still uses today. This friendship, right, between this 6-year-old little boy and his tiger are as much a part of my childhood as my bedroom. Actually, the two are like intertwined, really. Every day I would rush up to my room after a frustrating day at school with those like multiplication quizzes. Hated those. So I would throw myself upon the floor and get lost in this world. I would leave all of the crap behind and immerse myself in this world with Calvin and Hobbes. Now, I'm assuming you're already like well acquainted with this peculiar pairing here of a 6-year-old boy and his tiger. Calvin and Hobbes was a comic strip that ran between November 1985 to December 31st, 1995. Which means there was a time where Christian Howard existed while Calvin and Hobbes was still producing new strips. And that just brings me so much personal satisfaction. Of course, that does mean, though, that by the time that I was actually old enough to read them, they were long finished. What was in these books that I was slowly accruing was all there was ever going to be. And accruing, I did. Starting from Homicidal Jungle Cat, to the 10th anniversary book, to The Revenge of the Babysat, I made my way backwards through the collection until I owned every single Calvin and Hobbes book. Well, I mean, technically my parents did, but they were very encouraging and supportive of my strong desire to read these. And unlike like Garfield or those other stupid comics, as my mother so strongly felt, Calvin and Hobbes encouraged my imagination. At least that's how I spun it to them. But in reality, I'm pretty sure it was just my dad liked reading these comics as much as I did. Little me was way too young and unexperienced to get a lot of the jokes or themes that Watterson said through the mouth of Calvin. Now, why am I telling you all of this? You see, lately I've been spending a lot of time at a local library, taking advantage of their very fast upload speed on their Wi-Fi to back up a lot of my Malaysia footage. And the other day I decided to grab a book to entertain myself while I was waiting. I found some light reading. I was holding all the other books up. Now, confession. In the years since graduating school, I have stopped reading for pleasure. I mean, yeah, I read articles and I read guides online on like how to do things, but it's almost entirely utilitarian. That passion I had as a child, that ability to fully leave this world and enter another that in that time felt just as real as this existence, I lost it. So while I was perusing these library shelves, whereas years ago I would have felt pulled into the fiction section, maybe for a good science fiction story or a fantasy. Today, I felt no such pull. Instead, I drifted, like, almost on instinct, really, to the art section. Then down a little until there it was. Here, almost 350 miles away from where I first met him, there he was. Homicidal Psycho Jungle Cat. And suddenly I was 9 again, laying on the floor and planning out with my cousin how to annoy his older sister. I sniffed the book. And, well, the smell wasn't quite the same. There was a whiff of a bit of the smell of my childhood. Now, granted, I've shared with you many times how, like, the timeline of my life is really split into 3 sections. There was my childhood in Sacramento, my teenagehood in North Carolina, and finally my adult life here in LA. And because of the immense physical distance, as well as the cultural differences in between these places, these 3 sections of my life feel like completely different lifetimes until this moment, this visceral reconnection to my childhood. And you know, another reason for these 3 sections feeling so disconnected is because for every long move, I have left so much behind. I do not have a single physical thing from my childhood. Even my, like, the equivalent of a teddy bear, Sammy the Lammy, who would keep me safe the first couple nights that I was sleeping in my own bedroom for the first time, keep all the monsters away, and I have kept with me my entire life. I recently have learned that he has been lost in North Carolina during one of my parents' moves while I have been on this side of the country. The only physical object I have that still ties me back to that innocence, that pure, positive outlook on life, the obliviousness to all of the horrendousness that this world offers, that pure innocence, is a plastic baggie of bark from my school playground. And the best part is that's not even bark from when I was there. That was from a trip in 2014. I don't even have anything from my teenagehood because my move out here was just supposed to be for a few months to help my grandfather with his health issues that he was having in his old age. And you don't really pack teenage memorabilia when you're just gonna be somewhere for a few months. Or at least the next 3 months, I'm gonna be living with them and helping them just around the house. And when I'm not doing that, making these videos. And that's what's going on. I will be here until December. And every trip I have made back to NC to be with my family again, I've left space in my suitcase to bring back here just a little bit more of the life that I left behind there. Oh my gosh. Yeah. The first camera that I ever filmed with, this poor abused thing. I was low-key hoping it had battery life. Until the last trip, where I think I have brought back everything I can. In this moment at the library, I was thrust back a decade. I could still hear these written words with the cadence and tone that little 10-year-old me gave them. And the best part is, after all of this time and experience in the world, I was finally able to get the jokes that previously I was too young to understand. This was not just a comic book. This is not just a comic strip. This is a reconnection, a tying back the timeline. So, thank you, Bill Watterson, for creating such an integral part of my childhood. And because of that, who I am to this day. Thank you to my parents for not just allowing it, but encouraging it. Thank you to my public library system. Seriously, support your public library. They need it, especially because you know that if the idea was pitched today, it absolutely would never happen, which is awful because they're an invaluable resource. And finally, thank you for letting me get all of this out and attempt to process and understand the reasons behind this rush of emotions I've experienced this week. Stay positive.